Hello, my name is Quinn Carman, and I am the Director of Operations for the NSA's Red Team. I have over 17 years of experience working on Department of Defense Red Teams, which are cybersecurity teams that act as adversaries to test the security of some of our nation's most sensitive systems and networks. As an opposing force for training and assessments, we do not scan and find every vulnerability, but instead we look at target networks and facilities to inform the defenders where their weaknesses are and where their defenses are also working. On the DoD Red Teams, I specialized in cyber exploitation, close access operations, and in social engineering. Prior to my DoD Red Team work, I was a network security administrator, primarily in the health information industry. Having been a network defender, I understand just how challenging it is to keep the bad guys out while providing all the required network services. It's my hope that by sharing this perspective, I can help others make more informed decisions about how to defend their facilities and networks. The NSA has two primary missions, both signals intelligence, or SIGINT, which is collecting foreign intelligence from communications and information systems, and also cybersecurity. Our cybersecurity mission is to prevent and eradicate cyber threats to our nation's most sensitive systems, focused initially on the defense industrial base and weapon system security. To do so, we learn about our adversaries, capabilities, actions, and intentions through our SIGINT mission and apply that threat intelligence to our cybersecurity mission. While it is the NSA's mission to protect our nation from foreign adversaries, we also provide support domestically to other federal agencies such as DHS and the FBI. This support often comes in the form of NSA cybersecurity experts working with our federal and law enforcement partners in order to assist with domestic cybersecurity events like incident response and advice on network security. We're able to provide unique impact to the community by integrating threat intelligence, vulnerability assessments, and cyber defense expertise to deliver outcomes. Our end goal is to leverage real-time cyber insights and cryptographic expertise to protect national security and critical infrastructure in a way the public can trust. My goal with this presentation is to give you an attacker's perspective. I'm not going to spend this time going over how to defend against a specific type of attack or how to build an insight or threat mitigation strategy or get down into the weeds of specific attacks. I'm going to speak to the experiences across all of my time on multiple Department of Defense Red Teams, and not just while I was at the NSA. I want to show you at a high level a little bit about how an attacker views an organization to go through several main phases of an attack to help inform how we as an adversary think about a target. Every time we, as the adversary, hit enter on the keyboard, it creates an opportunity for network defenders to identify that activity as malicious and begin their efforts to stop us. But we also have a huge advantage. Network defenders must find every vulnerability and catch every attack. We only need to find one way in. That's why network defenders have such a challenging job. They must balance the functional requirements and availability with network security and risk acceptance. During this presentation, I will be focused on cyber attack and close access, which is physically gaining access to a computer system using surreptitious means like social engineering, fake badges, etc., as they are the most relevant to network defense. As network defenders get more and more adept at thwarting our adversarial actions, we must constantly evolve our strategy and tools in order to continue to stay successful. As soon as one method of threat mitigation is implemented, we're already working to find a workaround of some sort. This game of one-upmanship keeps us all evolving in our disciplines. Network defense improves, so do we. As a friendly opposing force, we have many restrictions placed upon us. Some of those are legal restrictions, while others are just things we can't do because it could break the integrity of the network that we're trying to assess. Our real adversaries don't face those same restrictions. The close access, safety is a huge issue. The network defenders are armed with real bullets, not just cyber bullets, and also dogs. They have dogs. From the very beginning as an attacker, we began to look for clues to give us a feeling as to the posture and culture of the target. It's our impression that factors into the decision-making and informs how aggressive we are as an adversary. We're often noticed, but because our activities can usually be explained as other on-net operations, they're rarely aggregated by the network offenders, and so therefore we're rarely caught. A good example of not being noticed and not caught during one of our attacks is we had stolen a VPN configuration of a target, but the only account that we had with the VPN privileges was a service account, and service accounts don't typically use VPNs to access remote networks, and the service account came from a higher level network administrator organization used for administrating subcomponents. But we were against a deadline, and we needed to speed things up a bit, so we took the risk based upon our assessment of what we'd seen of that network culture. And what we didn't know, and we didn't find out until the Tech on Check training we were doing at the end of the engagement, was that we were immediately noticed. However, the lower level administrators called those upper level administrators and asked them the incorrect question. They asked them if they used that account. And they replied that they use that account all the time, and that was the end of the conversation. What they didn't ask is if they were using it now to log in through VPN, et cetera, et cetera. So if they had just asked a few more of those questions, we would have been caught. A target is chosen either due to opportunity, like poor boundary patching found in the scans, or for its line of business, meaning that it's critical, the bad guy really wants something that's in there, and so they go after it. An attack generally begins with two possible goals in mind. Either it's for computer network exploitation, that's C&E, meaning that they want the data, or CNA, computer network attack, which means that they want to be able to deny or break something. It is possible that they are after both. Exploitation generally occurs prior to an attack, as maintaining network access during such a loud event is difficult. Overall, an attack can be divided into four main phases, each with specific objectives which drive the overall mission objectives. Research on the network begins with a focus to learn about the organization that we're assessing, that we're attacking, and to begin to put together how we conduct the most challenging phase of the assessment, and that is initial access. Getting through that boundary protection is where close access can provide a lot of benefit, but it is by far the most difficult portion of an assessment. After gaining access, the rest of the attack is to get in a position to either move lots of data off the network target or to execute an attack of some sort. Think denial of service or distraction. And then finally, as a red team, we need to clean up and get out of the network. Sometimes we persist for a long time on exploitation-like assessments. However, that is all dependent upon the goals of the operation. The adversary will lurk in a network for many, many years, waiting on the right time to move data or create an effect. As a red team, we just don't have that kind of time. Some networks we do persist for quite a while, but not nearly as long as the adversary will remain in a network. Research is critical in building an effective attack strategy. Hobbies, work types, conferences, observing how much discipline and security / surrounding awareness the target organization has can come from many sources, especially social media these days. The aggregate of that data informs our initial attack strategy. The more information there is out there for an attacker to discover, the more effective their attacks are going to be. Their information in social media allows for the creation of well-developed and targeted phishing attacks. We have been able to show up on site with very accurate forged documents and badges on numerous occasions, just from what's out there on social media alone. I want to foot stomp badge discipline here. If you don't need the badge displayed in order to physically be where you are, put it away. You don't need to have your badge out at Chipotle. This is a huge indicator of a lack of security-minded culture for us, and it makes the adversary very excited to begin exploiting that lack of awareness. And that's a bad thing for the target network defense. All it takes is a camera, a mobile phone works really well for this, and a printer that can easily be purchased off of the internet, and the badge card stock, and it can be acquired quite quickly. For proximity, or what are called prox card badges, all we need to do is walk near that badge with a backpack, and it has a plate and a card reader in it, and we get that badge information off of it. The next step is we're going to need the PIN for the building, and that just requires tailgating with that individual that has their badge out. There are a couple of tricks to help get that PIN. One of those is actually we can use two operators, one of them with a dry erase marker that will actually put little dots on the keypad buttons, and then the person walking behind them can try to observe the number, but if you don't get all of the numbers, we'll be able to see which dry erase markers were rubbed off, and that is going to inform us about what numbers are being used, and that can significantly reduce the number of combinations we have to guess. Whether utilizing close access or on-net methodologies, the purpose here is to gain access to the network. Physical access can provide direct access to data like filing cabinets, etc., but these days most of the data actually exists on the computer systems and on the network. So that's what our end goal is. Initial access is the most risky part of the operation and is based on social engineering more often than it's a technical attack of some sort. At this phase, the adversary must find a way through or around the most well-defended and watched portions of the networks. If parts of the perimeter are vulnerable to attack due to lack of training, capability, or patching, then it can lower our exposure and time spent in this phase. The easiest way onto a network or building is to get someone to open the door for you. So most cyber and physical penetration attacks involve some sort of social engineering or talking the users, network defenders, in to let us in. Using close access operations, sometimes direct access to server rooms or data centers can be obtained. Physical access also isn't usually as risky as one would expect. We have a very helpful culture. People like to help each other. So if I can talk someone into letting me in somewhere, then that's my end goal. A little information about open source research, open source intelligence at this point, combined with a clipboard, a fake invoice, and basic knowledge of IT systems can usually get you into where the admins sit, a data closet, or just simply to a random desktop to enable remote access for an off-site team ready to receive the implant. We rarely observe cross-communications between network defense and physical security teams. So even when a close access team, for example, is caught, it doesn't usually tip off the network defenders that there's that's part of a network cyber attack. One particularly challenging network I worked on took a combination of cyber and close access work in order to get on to that network. We were having trouble getting into the network, but saw that they had a facility that was commonly being visited by lots of external people, i.e. people that don't work in the building. And that makes us pretty comfortable because they're used to seeing strange people in the building. We walked in there, we had a wireless access point and a clipboard, a few other things. And we asked the front desk there if they had any network connectivity issues over the past few months or whatever. And of course, every network always has some problems. And they said it hadn't been a while, and so we said that we were going to plant this network monitoring device that was going to keep an eye on the network connectivity and speed for them and help inform us so that we could potentially upgrade their network in the future. And they were very excited to hear this, and they helped us find a really good spot for it. It was a wireless access point, and we put it near a window by a printer next to a parking lot, and we pulled many, many gigabytes of data off of that network over the rest of the week, just by sitting in a nearby parking lot, sitting in the car, and just pulling data off, bypassing the network defense. And we found out later that the network security team actually showed up several times in order to try to identify that rogue wireless access point. However, the people there that worked in the building were so excited about getting their networks sped up and working better that they were hiding it for us and not telling them where it was and not letting them access to a couple of the rooms like the one where it was there. So it was that overall lack of communication between the people that work in the building and the network security team and being able to be kept out of that room that allowed us to be successful. The most common access method by far to gain access to a target network is by a phishing attack. Phishing is as much a social engineering attack as it is trying to convince somebody to do something that they shouldn't than it is a cyber attack. We want our phishing attacks stories to be just good enough for a user to want to do what we ask of them, but forgettable enough that in a few hours they're not thinking about it anymore. We don't want them expecting anything out of it. Phishing is the lowest risk and most successful way of penetrating a target network, and it can be executed from anywhere in the world. Also, high-tier and low-tier techniques can be used. So we can either do a low-tier type attack against a lot of people, or very specific, well-informed researched attacks against targeted users. A targeted attack that's well researched takes a lot more time to execute. However, it sometimes allows us to go exactly where we want to go instead of being dropped in at a random place on the network. For broader attacks, we can even put errors in the language, for example, so that adversaries use this technique all the time, purposely wording emails poorly with some misspellings so that network security-minded people who are paying attention aren't going to click on it, but the people that are less apt to be paying attention to these sorts of things will be those who install or do what we want them to do. Therefore, we'll have hopefully have a higher success rate of being able to social engineer them to do what we need to do. Watering hole attacks can be valuable for initial access as well, but also using those to move around within a network. If you can get on the intranet websites, we can take over those, and then as people access that throughout the organization, we can hopefully find some vulnerabilities there, that unpatched boxes that we can move to just by sitting on internal web servers. During all of the assessments, we look for external misconfigurations, but they are very rare. We occasionally do find targets of opportunities, but keeping up with the boundary protection, firewall configurations, and external patching usually keeps us out. Now that we have access, it's time to expand upon what we need. We take our impressions of network defense as a culture, and that determines how aggressive we are, particularly in this phase. If we're comfortable, we'll move faster, more scanning, more aggressive tactics. If we feel that there's a culture of security, though, we're going to have to adjust that speed and work to move more quietly through the target networks. Also, this isn't magic. The most common way to increase privileges here isn't the use of fancy exploits, the 0 days that are unknown and unpatched vulnerabilities. Those are expensive. They're hard to come by. They usually have a very short period of time which are going to work because 0 days are going to get patched. Also, there's something really that you just keep as a last resort in case you're just in a wall and you really need to get into something. Full domain compromise here is always welcome, but it's actually not always necessary. And this is something that the network defenders don't always keep in mind. Oftentimes, we just need to get maybe a file server administrator or a key user in a target in a sensitive part of the network, and then that's going to get us access to all the data that we need. Now, full domain compromise is always great, but it's just not always necessary. During one assessment, the network admins knew we were going to be on net. We don't prefer this, but they had been tipped off and found out that there was going to be a red team coming after their network, and they're watching all of their admin accounts. So we just stayed away from them. We lived entirely in user space. We got everything we needed, and when speaking with them, they were 100% sure that we hadn't even been on their network. This demonstrated a lack of their understanding about what their network really does. They thought their accounts were the important part of the network because they controlled everything, but it's really the data and the mission of the organization that we're going after that is interesting to the adversary, not the network defenders. So getting those creds of the network administrators is merely a means to an end and not the end accomplishment. And so if we can find out an easier way to get to the data or get to where we need to be on the network, that's what the bad guy does, and that's what we do too. Once we are in the network, there are many ways to escalate privileges and to get where we need to be. I'm not going to spend a ton of time digging into the weeds here, but the best way to escalate privileges in general is to use the tools and the admins are using and or that are available on the operating system. We use these to take advantage of misconfigurations and generally poor security practices. Things like password reuse allows us to jump networks from one to the other. Gathering network data for phishing or social engineering, allowing us to spearfish a particular target, is another valuable way to escalate privileges without any neat or magical tricks and exploits on the network. We can try commonly used passwords, network administrators using their administrator account for non-administrator tasks is another big way that we can hijack those accounts and use those credentials. Exploits are always an option, but these days they're very rare that they're going to work, especially remote escalation type exploits. Years ago, much more common, but these days they're tough. Networks can generally be built with security practices built in, but it's the people that are using them that in ways that they shouldn't, or they create a security vulnerability unknowingly that allows our success. When all else fails, sometimes for us, it's good to be lucky. We were on a very small network. There were about 20 hosts plus some servers, and we had one day to get access to the network and escalate it. We got access, we got into the file server, we got a lot of the data, but we couldn't get the entire domain, and it was kind of disappointing to us. We were trying to get to that. So I went in to sit down at the machine that I was going to brief in their conference room. I logged into it, not by an account that they gave me, but using one that we were able to obtain from the network. And I look at the desktop after logging into that conference room machine, and it had a text document titled passwords.txt. So I thought to myself, no way, this can't be what I think it is. I open it, and not only did it have the local domain admin administrator accounts, but it also had those of the parent domain and the rest of the forest. And from that time forward, I made sure to look at for password.txt documents at workstations all over the networks I was working on. So after we get the privileges we need, it's finally time to execute what we've been working towards this entire time. For data mining and network exploitation, it can be a one-time big move, or the attacker can bed down for the long haul and just move a little tiny bit of data off the network over a very long period of time. Looking at the daily traffic patterns and network flow informs the attacker on when we can best move that data. So that we don't want to be the only traffic on the wire. We don't want to do it in the middle of the night when no one else is there. So trying to hide in plain sight, as you were. Also, we want to make the traffic look kind of irregular when we're doing this. We don't want to do it at the same time every day. We want to be able to persist and not create any specific signatures for that data flow so that we can act as the adversary does and persist for years if we needed to. For network attack type activities, at that point we'll build the code to run whatever needs to be triggered. Sometimes it's manually triggered and kicked off by us. Sometimes it occurs when a specific event happens on a network, like a user opens Outlook and then it does something and sends out a bunch of emails or something of that nature. There's a lot that an adversary that owns your network at that point can do to your target network, and that's just not a situation you want to get into. You want to find them way before this can happen, because at this point you're going to be playing catch up if you're trying to defend your network. One location, it was our goal to take control of the network away from the network administrators, as the leadership there wanted to see if their procedures would be effective against a live on-net hacker. So we did, and we were operating locally in a secured conference room and we used social engineering to get in there. We told the people who own that conference room that we were rehearsing a skit for an upcoming event that we were doing in our work center, and we were not to be disturbed as we had very little time to get it done. And after we began our network attack, the network defender sent a young network security engineer by himself with a laptop to go find out if we were operating from where they thought they were. And he had to go to several places. And because they thought we were practicing a play, they weren't letting him in the room. We could hear the conversation outside the door as we were trying to maintain control of the network. And this poor person was just trying to get in there and try to get stopped. So finally they do, and they let us in there. And then the people we had social engineered to allow us to work on our skit in there open the door, of course, and they see all our computers everywhere, a bunch of laptops, and a bunch of us obviously not rehearsing a skit. So it was kind of a moment but at that point, they didn't have any security or police with them, so we have a hostage now. We actually sent fake ransom notes, and this young individual was played along with us. He actually had a pretty good time. But if you have a real bad guy on a network and you think they're physically in the building, suggest you inform security. So I've gone over at a high level what makes us succeed. Now, what causes us problems? First off, the size of the target is important. Small networks and facilities mean that we're going to stand out more as hider. It's much more difficult to hide in a small building or a small network. Also, the targets of opportunity in those are much smaller, and it's typically better defended as in that they're better patched, as there are fewer machines. A large facility or network is more challenging to secure, and therefore from our perspective, there are more opportunities for an attacker to go unnoticed. The most challenging network and facilities tend to have good relationships between their departments as well, so that the network security team works well with these sales teams or the engineering teams, or everyone else is kind of thinking about this and working together. And also, it's important that network security understands the mission of the network that they're trying to defend, because that's going to inform what should be defended on that network. Leadership support and training of network defense staff, external security audits are viewed as learning events and not something that is punished when a failure or a misconfiguration is discovered. These are all critical. We've discovered that over time, that when the network defenders get the resources and the training that they need, they're more invested in making sure that that happens on the network, and therefore that culture is starting to get baked in to the organization and the network, and it's becomes a problem for us, which is a good thing. And most importantly, the leadership encourages relationships across all facets of the organizations, so that network security is a culture not just for the network defense team and the IT department, but also for all the other departments, and they're thinking about this and they can contribute to defending their business. Also, there's little compartmentalization. The attitude that it's not my problem is typically absent from the orgs that give us those sorts of problems. Everybody is thinking about how to keep bad guys out at a regular basis, and when they see something, they say something. The key takeaway I want to leave you with is that building a network security culture is critical. That involves everyone in your organization building a culture of awareness. Employees shouldn't be afraid to ask questions as to why people are in secure areas, and everyone has to remain diligent to thwart a cyber attack. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope this was helpful and stimulated some thought as to how to make your organization more secure.
Quinn, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Oh, that's great. I really do appreciate your time today. We are actually live, and we're going to field a few questions that you can answer. Quinn, thank you so much for joining us. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's go with how has AI, artificial intelligence, affected the lethality of attackers and their attack vectors?
So artificial intelligence is such a new thing that right now it's not really assisting us much or a lot of attackers. It can help in certain instances, help the operators make a more informed decision. It can kind of speed things up. The faster that you can make these decisions, the fewer chances you have of getting caught. But generally speaking, there doesn't seem to be a significant impact on attacking using AI at this point.
Okay, terrific. It's funny, we do have a career question. We do have some people that now want to work for the NSA and or the CIA. Do you have to have a top secret SCI to work there? Meaning that do you have to be a US? Do you have to be a US citizen and have to go through the clearance process to get any kind of a job with the NSA?
So the best way. So yeah, the best way to figure all of that out, I'm not in HR, so I don't have all the answers. However, there's a public-facing website, intelligencecareers.gov/NSA. You go there, it's got all of that information. Generally speaking, so for us, we require a degree, and you'll have to get a security clearance as part of the process. That's kind of comes with it, but they have all your answers on that website.
Excellent. More of a generic question. Protecting personal emails from cyber attacks. I mean, there's so many ways to even view that challenge. Any best practices that you could share?
Well, that's a really tough one. Knowing, first off, don't just click and open every email that you get. Sure. Make sure all of your systems are patched, all of those standard things. and making sure that you're not reusing passwords. That way, if you do accidentally click on something and you use a password for something, that it's not the password for your bank, that sort of thing. So some of that separation really helps. But those sorts of attacks are very, very challenging to defeat. It just takes a lot. It's all back to that culture again of just awareness that even when you're looking your email at your house or at work, you're subject to attack from those vectors from a bunch of bad guys that would like to get into the information that you have. So you just need to be diligent and aware of what you're looking at and what you're doing at all times.
Sure. Don't click on that news link that says that there's an earthquake in LA, because you have to double check where it's from, and
yeah, just go to the website, Google search it yourself instead of clicking on the link.
Don't click on any links. Have you seen a percentage rise with cybercrime during this COVID crisis? Has it been the same on the rise, or has it been more of a higher angle?
So that's us being red team for my job role there. I get the same news that everyone else does. So as far as an increase in cybercrime, I know what I know from abcnews.com, et cetera. So from a red team standpoint, we're pretty sure that there's an increase in that, but I'm not network defense or a security or a intelligence analyst, so I'm not sure.
You're the attacker, the ethical attacker now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, how concerned are you about the attacks against the infrastructure in the United States? For example, the recent scanning of energy companies in the US. Obviously, that's a top priority for you and CISA. Any comment on that?
Well, to be fair, everything that we've got, whether you're a corporation or a government entity, is under attack at all times. So
right.
This isn't anything new. Since any of these devices have been plugged in to the internet, they've been subject to attack constantly. So we're concerned about attack against our public infrastructure, like we're concerned about attacks against business corporations, government entities, everything. We're fighting a war on many fronts, and we're just doing the best we can to hold off the bad guys.
Okay. Here's one. Do you use C2 frameworks like Cobalt Strike or open source ones, or just self-developed frameworks?
Sure, yeah. So as a red team, all of our tools, tactics, and procedures, we like to call them TTPs, are unclassified. Most of what we use is commercial off-the-shelf stuff. We like to emulate the bad guy as much as we can, so we get the same sort of things that they have access to. We use a combination of home-built type attack platforms in C2, as well as those like Cobalt Strike and others that you can publicly purchase to give our customers the best looks. All of our tools, because we are the good guys, we have to go through a significant vetting process. So we disable a lot of the features of the tools to make sure that we don't even break our customers' network or create a vulnerability or that sort of thing. So we're actually very, very restricted on what we can do with a lot of those things. But most of the tools in our tool set you would recognize, I think.
Gotcha. Are IDS, IPS really effective, or does it give more or a false sense of security?
So the answer to that is they can be. They're a tool, a piece of the network defense architecture and network defense strategy. If employed properly and monitored, and with all the procedures in place, and you have skilled and trained personnel using them, yes, they can actually be very effective. Where our traffic goes through those sensors all the times, and whether or not we're stopped depends on how much training and knowledge the network defenders have in recognizing that traffic.
Okay. This is a kind of a general question, but should be addressed. Compared to white hat / black hat attackers and team, what is the definition of the red teams in the industry?
So the red team it's the closest thing you could think of a red team would be similar to a penetration testing type team, except that we're even more specific. It's like a more refined version of a penetration test, in that we specifically look at a network only as a bad guy would, meaning we don't touch every box, we don't scan every IP, we're not interested in every port 25 that's open or whatever. What we're after is we look at an entity as a whole, an organization, and then we figure out what a bad guy would do to it. And we do that. We find one way in. There might be 10 other ways in. We don't know, because the bad guy isn't going to care about that. They're just going to reach their objective. So that's what we do to give that customer that adversarial viewpoint of what their network would really look like to a bad guy if they were to suffer a cyber attack.
Okay. From your point of view, with the usage of one federated account, for example, MS-0365 or one identity for all tools and authentications, help to protect an organization, or would it help potential attackers?
So that's complicated. We haven't attacked anything like that. Those are commercial entities. We look at government entities and DoD. So we don't have any experience attacking those specific platforms. However, if you can defend a single, it has its plus and minuses. If you funnel all the attackers into one spot, then you give them a single point to be caught. So that's good and makes defense easier. However, if you are compromised, they've got everything at that point. So you have to weigh those.
Sure. Can private, that's a great question. Can private, I guess, or even publicly held companies hire the NSA red team? How does that work?
Unfortunately, that's more of a legal sided question.
Sure.
The short answer is no.
Right.
You can work with your domestic partners such as DHS, FBI, if you have a cyber intrusion or something like that. And then that's kind of a way to possibly get us involved. However,
Right.
There's no
A large organization
to reach us out and get us to help you, generally speaking.
Right. So like a large organization or any major breach, they would never call the NSA, they would call the FBI. Their first move, aside from, well, the first move is really the FBI. What is the best first reaction in an incident response that you recommend?
So not really sure is if you're seeking government help in that, honestly, I'm not really sure. It's not what we do. It's not in my wheelhouse. The way we get those sorts of requests comes in internally from our external government partners. So as far as what you have to do on the other side, I apologize. I can maybe research that information, but it's a little, I just don't, it's not the way we engage with the public typically.
No worries. Listen, thank you so much for your time. I know we're going to run to the next session.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in Los Angeles on the 10th of December.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You got it.